We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the Halting Winter Podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the Halting Winter Podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Scottie Harris, town manager in Weaverville, North Carolina. Can't wait to hear what's going on the other side of the country from where I'm at in Washington State right now. Scottie, welcome to the podcast. It is a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you, Steve. And today for us is like your side of the country because it's been pouring rain here all day today.
Oh, no, we've exchanged. We've had rain the last couple of days. Now we're getting some sun. So, it's funny how that works. Well, you were recently recognized by the North Carolina League of Municipalities with a certificate of municipal excellence at their recent City Vision conference. I saw that on LinkedIn and said, well, I got to hear what's going on in North Carolina. Where's Weaverville? I didn't even know where Weaverville is. But, and then I started looking at your story and fire chief and all kinds of fire expertise all around the world. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a fascinating conversation. So, but before we unpack the world of fire, we got to figure out how you got there. Scottie, take us back to the beginning. Tell us about where you were born and kind of the childhood that shaped you and launched this career.
Thanks, Seth. Yeah, I'm from North Carolina originally. I grew up in Selma, just outside of Raleigh, about 30 minutes east of Raleigh, North Carolina. And you kind of grew up playing sports and worked my way up from there and enjoyed that teamwork and camaraderie. Going through high school, I decided I wanted to either go to the military for fire crash and rescue or MP and come out and do a career firefighter from there. So looking at that aspect and knowing kind of what I wanted to do after high school, my mindset was I didn't really need high school. I just needed to make it out. In my plan. And as I got out and I enrolled in a community college for our fire science program. And that first week of college, I decided I've had enough of English 101 and went down to the recruiter's office and said, sign me up, and ended up going to the U.S. Air Force Reserve for fire crash and rescue and coming back stateside, and ended up doing that for a year and transitioned. And that's kind of how I got my start in the fire service a little over 30 some odd years ago now. So.
Oh, I love it. Okay, back us up because there's two things here. I think I love encouraging young people to just see the different ways people get to where they're at, because I think there's a lot of pressure that there's very few. You got to do this path, and if I mess up this path, I can't do anything. And it's like, that's just not truth. And in fact, one of these things, like you just said, military, you knew fire. I don't know of anyone who was like, I went into the military so I could become a firefighter. That's unique that you had that. What happened in childhood that turned you on to EMS or fire? Did you have some kind of experience, or did you have relatives that worked in that field? What was it that tuned your attention to that?
I had a lot of friends growing up that were in the fire service already, and and some of my parents' friends worked in the fire service. My dad, for a few years, was a volunteer rescue squad member back before most everything become paid on the EMS side. So I was exposed to that servant type thing from a public safety standpoint all through the years, and everything from law enforcement to fire, and that's just a route that I chose to go, and wanted to be able to give back in that aspect, and seeing the difference that people made, and having someone to look up to. I saw that impact that they were able to generate in, unfortunately, some of the lower poverty areas, as well as, the more sustainable areas. And, they delivered a service the same no matter who they were dealing with, and so I felt led to that path.
Yes. It's interesting. I grew up on a ranch an hour north of Seattle. It was small. I mean, the little town of Sylvana, I think still to this day has like 100 people. And it still has the fire department downtown, which is all volunteer, except for I think 2 people. They have the chief is paid, and then the, I don't know, like maybe the secretary or somebody. But again, my dad was a volunteer firefighter. His brother was a volunteer firefighter. All the ranch, cowboys, farmers were volunteer firefighters. And so, but I never connected that to city, probably because we didn't have I don't even think there's a city. I don't think it's not an authorized city, right? And so I didn't understand that fire and police are connected often to municipalities, to districts, to counties. Did you have any awareness of that scope of municipalities, or was it just kind of the lane tunnel of fire?
The larger municipalities around us, like say Raleigh, Cary, and those areas, Wilson, Goldsboro, they had paid staff, but most of our growing up, I mean, we're kind of like you were saying, is that it was all volunteer, and then you might be fortunate, then they added, one paid person just to get the truck out the door, growing up, but the jobs weren't as plentiful as they are now in the fire service and the staffing levels.
Yeah, I talked to someone in Wisconsin a few weeks ago, and they were talking about, and again, in rural Wisconsin, they still rely heavily on volunteers, which is interesting. Kind of the volunteers in most places, it seems, have gone away, and now it's all professional paid staff. But still, lots of parts in the world where especially in rural areas, where you rely on good-natured people still, raising their hand and saying yes. Okay, so you go into the military. You decide, I love that. Like, you're like, I'm done with school. No more English classes, done with tests and papers. And I think there are some people, the young people listen to this, they feel the same. They're like, gosh, is there another way to do what I want to do without this path? Tell us about what did that look like? Is you said the reserves, but they had fire academy training. What was that like when you joined the military?
Yeah, I went down and talked to the recruiters and told them, this is the only thing I'll take, whether it's the MP or Fire Crash and Rescue. And I talked with the Marine Corps to start with, and they couldn't guarantee me a job. And I talked to the Air Force, and, knowing that, they have a lot more fire than most other branches of the service. In the Navy, you end up being a damage controlman, and everybody on the ship puts out a fire. You don't get a specific fire job. So again, went back to the Air Force, and what they explained to me is the only way I can guarantee you the job is to sign reserves, and that way the spot is slotted for you. And so you'll go to boot camp, you'll go to tech school training. At that point in time, it was in Chanute Air Force Base in Illinois. Now they've moved that program to Goodfellow in Texas. But the slots weren't available when I talked to the recruiter. So I started working at the sporting goods store, local there, in Smithfield. And then once the slot became available to line up, because they tried it, time it with your graduation date to be able to enroll in tech school and transition straight from there. So they reached back out, said the slot was available. And so that's when I left in 91 to go to boot camp with the Air Force. Was in a regular squadron, just like people who active duty. And then once graduated from there, going to Chanute Air Force Base for January, February, March for training there for Fire Crash and Rescue School.
Oh, so you did a 3-month training specifically for fire, crash, and rescue. And then what did that look like in the reserves? How long were you in the reserves? What was the next on the chapter?
I did 3 years in the reserves. And it was a 6-year enlistment, but our unit at Pope Air Force Base in North Carolina was disbanding. So I had an option to getting out. And by that time I was already working at a career fire department in Goldsboro. So I was losing my weekend time with the reserve status. You basically do 1 weekend a month, then 2 weeks out of the year for your drill time. So for me taking off work, they obviously let me off work for my drill weekends, but working a 24-hour shift, they didn't have to pay me for that time that I was there. So I was losing money. And when I looked at it long term, then with the unit disbanding, I was going to have to travel down to Charleston for that unit there. So they give me the option of getting out still with an honorable discharge. And so I got out and stayed in the fire service in that aspect, and appreciated my time in the military. I mean, it taught me a lot growing up, a lot of sacrifices, and making the connections that I made through that aspect, and still continued that service.
Well, it's a really cool way to get training as well as be a part of, giving back through military service. I think that's awesome. But, we think about the trades. I oftentimes, talk about Mike Rowe and what he's done with dirty jobs for the trades. And I think I'm trying to do that for local gov. Like, let's shine the spotlight on all these cool opportunities. But like you say, you got to figure out the training. Some people go to a external academy for fire. The military had that. You did that. But you mentioned in that story that you started working then for a city while you were in the reserves, or you started working for a fire department. Was that right?
Correct. Yeah. When I came back, my first role was at a 911 center in Johnston County, and I worked there as a telecommunicator, taking and receiving 911 calls. Then I applied to Goldsboro Fire Department, and then got hired on there while I was still in the reserves, and was able to transition full-time firefighter, knowing that was the route I wanted to go. And so, I mean, that's kind of how I went, from still in the public safety sector side of things, and then made it to a career full-time coming out of the Air Force, already being certified. You helped in that aspect as a firefighter.
Okay, amazing. So how long then, the career I have for you picks up in 2005 when you head over to Iraq and do some work over there as an assistant fire chief. Do you bring us up to 2005? What happens? Are you still working for that one, that one city? What is that?
Yeah, I moved around to a couple of different departments. Like I said, I was with the city of Goldsboro, worked there as a firefighter. Left there, went to Morrisville Fire Department, and worked on shift as a fire inspector, investigator on shift, assigned to a company there, which is in the Triangle area just outside of Raleigh-Durham International Airport, that area in the Triangle. So I was working there, and then worked over at Western Wake Fire Department in Raleigh, and got hired there part-time, and then made it over to the assistant chief there and got promoted to fire chief during my tenure there, which led me up to 2005 to where I left to go to Iraq with a company called Wackenhut, WSI at that point, to help them. They were just starting out in Iraq, and doing a large contingent as the military pushed forward there to help set up fire departments, start fire departments, man fire departments, and expand from there. Our primary mission in Iraq in 2005 was confined to the base, working with military installations, setting up fire protection for them, and managing that aspect. But we did do some role with the local nationals. They're working with the Iraqis as well.
Oh, this is so fascinating. Well, first, I just want to highlight that you kind of been in these multiple situations. You've been 911, right? Dispatch officer. You've been firefighter. You've been assistant chief. Maybe take us back before, because I think this Iraq thing is super fascinating, because it's one of the things we don't think about. Like when the military went over, like, again, cities, reconstruction, like there are these civil services. This shows local government provides so many, resources that make life possible. And you have to think that's where you're going over doing the things that it takes to have civilizations. But before we get there, talk about the shift, maybe the first time you were in the seat as assistant and then even chief. What was different about it's different than fighting fires to now overseeing, right, a department and all the paperwork and all the stuff that comes with that. What was that transition like? Was that a natural fit for you? Were there some challenges?
I think it was mostly the natural transition, but my biggest thing is because of my leadership style. I've always managed from out behind the desk and walking around, being involved with the troops on the ground floor level. So it wasn't like I was separated from them on the floor. And a lot of times that's one of the things you run into when you move up in the ranks in leadership is, are you one of them or are you one of us still type thing? And so I mean, that camaraderie, because I always tried to still make time for the troops, sit down with them at dinner and break bread with them, and still have those conversations. But that respect was gained from both sides to where they knew business was business. If we had to sit down and have that difficult conversation from across the desk, or we could sit down at the dinner table and enjoy a meal together, and they knew when it was time for for the differences in those two conversations. But again, I think that goes back to leadership and the way I was groomed and grew up in the fire service to understand and earn that respect, and knowing that the respect didn't just come with the change in badge or the rank on the collar, that the respect was you being on the floor with our team members out there and growing from there, and getting to know each other, and still not being afraid to ask questions as the situation evolved, and working together.
I will get there when we get to where you're at now with Weaverville, but I think one of the things, and maybe you speak to it right now, is I would imagine, my assumption is that specifically like fire, like public works, like the people who are putting themselves into not only dangerous situations, but are doing real work. Like there's a physical, there's an emotional, there's a different kind of work than just office, HR, maybe economic development, maybe some of the other areas in a city. And I think that can be the divide sometimes when you have those employees who are doing a different type of manual labor or intensive labor, can feel like, well, management doesn't know us. Leadership doesn't, they don't get it. Like they're in their comfy cozy, and here we are. Have you seen, obviously it sounds like your leadership style is aware, it connects with them at that face-to-face level instead of just top-down kind of management. Do you find that even in your work now with multiple departments as a town manager, that being amongst the people as much as you can be? I'm sure your schedules demand, like, how do you even make time for that when you've got this whole now city to oversee?
One of the biggest things I've done, because that's, what I've always tried to ingrain in leadership, and knowing that it takes all of us to get there. And so being involved and engaged, getting out from behind the desk. So one of the things I do on my calendar is I block out time just like I would for any other regular meeting. And I get out to the departments and sit down, not just with our department heads, but with the boots on the ground staff as well, and give them an opportunity to interact, ask questions, and then still have that face-to-face connection, and being able to recognize our staff. Even in the fire service and going from my military days, I've always carried a Chiefs coin with me. The front side of it is presented by Chief Harris for outstanding performance. The back side of it is the ultimate measure of a person is not where they stand in times of comfort and convenience, but where they stand in times of challenge and controversy. And so being able to keep some of those in my pocket and see our staff doing excellent out there and being able to recognize them on the spot goes a long ways. And you can't do that if you stay behind your desk in the office all the time. So, so when I get out and able to interact with the teams out there, going all the way back to my early days of the fire service, and that come from, a company officer, my first captain in the fire service, he told me that, if I tell you to do something, I expect you to do it. He said, if you don't want to do it, you tell me why, because you might have seen something unsafe that I didn't see. But if I think we still need to do it, we're going to do it. And we'll talk about it when we get back to the station, and I'll explain the rationale and the logic behind that to you. So that stuff, we've been knowing that leadership out there, that, you're open to feedback, but also, sometimes the leadership at the top sees the bigger picture, to where the younger generation, as far as experience level, in the fire service or boots on the ground, doesn't see it all the time. So you take that opportunity to explain them, in a different environment. It's not, sometimes you can't have those conversations on the fire ground, but you can have those conversations. And I think that, leadership that was instilled in me early on in my career, that I carried throughout my career. And as they say with leadership, we take bits and pieces from every path we cross and kind of mold it to ourselves to fit what we need for the right, wrong, or indifference that we've come across.
May is National Cities, Towns, and Villages Month, which means it's a great time to recognize the people doing the amazing work that keeps our communities running. The work most people rarely see, and if we're honest, hardly ever fully appreciate. It's the work that doesn't slow down, and yet it's the work that's expected to be done day in and day out. Right now, that work is getting a little bit easier. Across local government, teams are finding small but meaningful ways to operate more efficiently, not by replacing people, but by removing the kind of work that pulls them away from what matters most. Things like drafting routine responses, sorting through data, managing workflows that used to take far more time than they should. This is where AI is starting to make a real impact, and Tyler Technologies is helping local governments do exactly that with tools designed specifically for your world, practical, secure, and built to support your team without adding complexity. Tyler has put together a free ebook on AI and efficiency in local government, along with additional resources to help you explore what this could look like in your organization. Find them all at tylertech.com/winter to help you keep doing the work that matters most. That's tylertech.com/winter. Now, back to the conversation. I love that little insight there. Practical application of going, hey, if you have a, not an issue, maybe that's not the right word, but if you're given an order and you say, man, I don't know, like, I see this, like being able to have the ownership and responsibility to give some feedback, but then at the end of the day go, hey, but if leadership still says this is the way it is, then trust that we have the bigger picture and then we'll talk about it. I think that, again, it's that clarity of open loop to be able to feel like I'm not just a cog in a machine, but I'm a part of something. But I also have to understand that my role isn't in that role. And I do have to have some trust, right? I think it's that back and forth that allows a healthy culture to survive in.
Yeah. And it wasn't just lip service. I mean, we put it in practice and in play on a working downtown fire. We had one business and it was a row of businesses on fire and had started spreading. And, we just pulled everybody out from the interior of the building. And a few minutes later, the command decided that we need to put people on the roof to try to get better access, to the other structures in there and try to hit the fire from there. And, when they made that order, I looked at the captain, was like, Cap, we just pulled everybody from out of that building because we felt concerns about the roof. I said, so now we're going to go get on that roof? And he's like, good point. Let me find out what we're doing. So he went and talked to the command officer and come back. It's like, no, we're not going back up there. But it's that matter of, sometimes you don't get the bigger picture. And then too, sometimes people are afraid to speak up and address something, especially from a safety standpoint because of the environment or the culture that you created. So, I mean, part of leadership is being able to have people that are comfortable speaking up, not disrespectful challenging you, but making you think through what decisions that you're making and the impact that you're going to have on others. I mean, so I've always appreciated that leadership style and how it's carried me through my career.
No, it's so good. So good. Tell us about how this is such an interesting turn to go, across the world to Iraq. How did that pop up on your radar? What was that like?
There was a big drive and heavy recruitment at that point in time, because of the amount of people needed to go over there, especially being certified. I mean, they were basically going over there and starting many cities. I worked at a victory base complex in Iraq. I mean, we had 5 fire stations, roughly about 10,000 people in that, between all the bases there in our little area. And there was about, 20 different outlying bases, what we consider FOBs, forward operating bases that would, so one of the things that I tell people is that I could go anywhere in the world as a fire chief. And the biggest thing I'm gonna do is I may go build a new fire station, or I may change or write some SOPs and SOGs, standing operating procedures and guidelines to fit my needs of the department. But very rarely will I ever have an opportunity to go start a fire department from scratch. And that's what we were doing there. We were being sent to a middle of the desert, to a flat piece of land and working with the green suiters, the military side, and saying, this is what equipment we need, this is how much personnel we need, and building that rapport with them, to knowing that they had a job to do outside the wire, and then we had a job to do inside the wire, keeping the soldiers safe there. And again, it goes back to, it's basically a city. You've got to have the same infrastructure there that you do in any city with running water, getting clean drinking water or bottled drinking water, as well as shower and latrine facilities as we grew the program. Now, it didn't start out that way. I mean, we started out in tents and built it up from there to where we finally had hard structures for dining facilities and things of that nature. But when you got that many people there, you're still operating it just like a little mini city.
What a wild experience to be a part of. Like you say, I mean, it's not like even coming in and, remodeling something to bring it up to current standards. I mean, sand, nothing to structure. That's a wild experience.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, that was, kind of what led me down this path of looking at different things is, in that aspect. And two, it's teamwork, team building, and because everybody comes in there with nothing, and all of a sudden you get to see the fruition of your work come together with buildings coming out of the ground. And again, whether they're, choose what we call container housing units, or whether they're in tents, or whether we start getting hard structures. But, and one of the things that I tell people, they ask me all the time, what was the difference in Iraq and Afghanistan? And I mean, I'm no politician by any means, but to me, the difference was Iraq was a 10-year war funded for 10 years. Afghanistan was a 10-year war funded 1 year at a time for 10 years, because we dumped money in to help create the infrastructure, because we were looking at the long term there and sustainability. So we basically built, cities out there for those bases, and that's, and so you had, everything from public works to public safety to, healthcare there. So you are running the city there just like you would here stateside. So.
Fascinating. And so you come back from the Iraq, you're there for a couple of years, and you come back and become the Deputy Director of Emergency Services for Cumberland County in North Carolina. Tell us about that. Now, obviously, I interview a lot of city managers, but we also have county administrators on. County and city, while they share some similarities, also have a lot of unique realities, especially with county when you are overseeing huge regions, suburban, rural, urban, all kinds of different realities. You're trying to get cities to work together. What was it like being a Deputy Director of Emergency Services? Give us a peek into that world.
The biggest difference there is that, I mean, it was a much more broader scale than what I was managing previously, being confined to a smaller footprint, and now having the entire county to worry about, as well as supervising our emergency management staff, our fire marshal's division, and our 911 center. But working closely with our sheriff department for searches or anything like that took place in the county. But that's looking at that aspect, and then all the departments there, fire departments, they weren't under county control. So you had, like we talked about at the beginning, with some volunteer or combination departments. We had every department out there other than the city of Fayetteville, as the larger municipality department in Cumberland County. We were working with them and being liaisons to the county staff, and and working through that aspect and helping them meet their needs. And this being 2007 time frame, and the fire service looked a lot different then than it does now, and and trying to lead people to more economic funding structure, with other than just doing fundraisers or collecting tax rate in your district. So trying to figure out how we could all buy turnout gear together, go and do bulk purchasing, everything from apparatus to things of that nature. That's kind of what a lot of the fire service has evolved to now. But from a county standpoint, I mean, you're looking at the entire county as a whole, and not just your little piece of the pie. And managing those district lines.
Yeah, it seems like, I remember being drugged by my dad to every pancake breakfast there was, for the fire department, trying to raise money for boots. But it was kind of, like you say, with county, man, I would imagine especially for emergency services, there's just so many present day emergencies that you're being called to, that you're trying to manage. But there's also the communication across all those lanes to, like you say, make sure that revenue is happening, make sure that actually you're able to provide those services. Man, that sounds like a busy job.
Yeah, I mean, and like I say, in county government, there's more services provided for the most part than local government municipalities in your cities and the towns in that aspect. So you're looking at a broader picture of service delivery aspect, and bringing that team together for that service delivery.
Well, you do that for 3 years, and then you go back across the water over to Afghanistan. You serve as a fire chief there for a couple of years. Again, a similar situation, I imagine, that when you were in Iraq?
Yeah, like I said, I was still doing emergency services deputy director in Cumberland County. The county manager, there was some challenges with our animal service division, and the county manager tasked me to go out there from a leadership perspective and help run or manage our animal control division, which was well outside of my scope, other than the leadership perspective. And I got out there and did that for probably about a year and a half or so, and decided that this ain't me. I can be a leader, but dealing with the task and the challenges, and having crews that were euthanizing animals and watching mistreatment of animals. That was carrying me down a mental health path that I didn't want to go down. So a company had reached out to me, and knowing that I had been in Iraq and helped them do the same thing there, they were looking for people to go to Afghanistan and help build fire departments and take over from a leadership perspective there. So I jumped at that opportunity when it came about, and basically started at ground zero again as a fire chief in Afghanistan. And you got a couple of different assignments there. One of my first assignments to go start up was spin Bodak. When it flew into the CAF at Kandahar, got an assignment to go out to spin Bodak, work with the military there, and that was on the Pakistan border. And we got there, and basically we had a pickup truck with a fire extinguisher on it, and that was it at the time. So we worked through that, and were able to get some tents and hard structures out there and get some fire trucks delivered, and basically create the fire department and starting over again.
That's so wild. What a crazy situation, crazy reality there. But like you say, this is how it works. Like, you need these resources when you build. And so, man, so cool. You do that for a couple of years in Afghanistan, and then you come back to the town of Cary, North Carolina, and you become the 911 supervisor. I want to hear about this. This sounds like, man, 911 is one of those things. I just don't think we give enough credit for the dispatchers who handle incredible stressful situations and have to, kind of like an air traffic controller, right? Figure out what's going on, how to send where. Tell us about that. But first, for the national audience, this is the metro area of Raleigh. I mean, I think the town of Cary is like 182,000 people, I think. It's a very large city. So very large. I mean, 911 is covering a lot of different places and activities. Tell us about it.
Yeah, they border the city of Raleigh, and Raleigh-Wake has their own 911 center for the city of Raleigh and Wake County at the time. We handled everything in Cary at that point in time, and did their law enforcement dispatch, fire dispatch, and then the county handled the EMS dispatch side of things. But I came back from Afghanistan, and that was the first job I landed as a shift supervisor there, working in the 911 center to be able to do that. And again, I mean, like you say, the 911 people, they definitely don't get enough credit. They're the true first responders. Responding on the fire call or from an EMS standpoint, it's kind of, for lack of a better term, it's cradle to grave. You get to see what's going on when you get there, and then you get to either take them to the hospital or treat them or put the fire out or whatever on that incident. So you kind of get some closure. But when you're on the other end of that phone at the 911 center, you're the person there calling for help. You get them to help there, and then you kind of lose contact with what the outcome of the call was, because it's on to the next ringing phone line. And so, I mean, to me, the 911 center is the true first responder out there. And then a lot of times they don't get the closure and still have that trauma that the same people that are responding to the incident deal with as well.
I was going to say, what is that like to I would imagine the training for that would have to help you emotionally regulate, because you're just dealing with, no matter what it is, there are real, there's a wreck, there's a fire, there's something that's absolute like hardcore tragedy. But the same person who calls in about their cat up in a tree is probably in a similar level of hysteria, right? That's important to them. And so you're just hearing, I can't imagine being in a role all day. I mean, I did customer service in college. I did like sales for like some phone company, MCI, and that was stressful enough to try to have to sell somebody, long distance phone carrier on their phone. But I can't imagine being on the phone. And again, that's the other thing. You're not like with them. You can't really respond. Your whole thing is to dispatch, is to hear and to respond. How do you weather a job like that is continual high emotion, high stress, carrying that of somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the biggest thing. And we've done a better job in the recent years of trying to create that stigma, to understand that it's okay not to be okay. Especially in the fire service, we had such a tough man mentality concept that we were superheroes, and we always had to wear our cape and represent that. But especially in the 911 center, it's trauma after trauma. It's ringing line after ringing line, hearing someone else's problem, concern, and emergency, because when they call you, it is their emergency. And it may not seem like much to you, but if they called you, then whether it was because they were having trouble with their child's homework or whether somebody was breaking in their house. I mean, that to them was an emergency. And so it was just understanding and still offering that compassion to the caller to try to, and that's one of the same way with law enforcement now when they teach de-escalation, to try to minimize from the mental health perspective. I mean, that's one of the things that you try to do to that 911 callers. You try to help minimize the situation, reassure them, get them some help out there. But then you're still, carrying that weight at the end of the day, at the end of the shift, or at that end of that phone call. So the biggest thing is just trying to understand the work-life balance, how to prioritize yourself physically and mentally, to be able to deal with the challenges that you face. And, because again, I mean, as soon as you hang up that phone, another one is ringing, and that person still on the other end expects you to be at your best and providing that same level of service.
That's right. Well, again, this podcast exists to shine the light on these people who serve in these roles that oftentimes we take for granted, especially with emergency response. We expect, right, when I have an emergency, they better answer the phone, they better show up, right, in 2 seconds flat. And so we have a lot of, we put a lot of requirements, right? We put a lot of desire and like a lot of performance on that, but then we don't think about it. And then we cry about paying our taxes and we, put up a fuss about it. And I just want to take a moment, in light of what you said, to paint a picture. I've had a couple friends in life who were gutter cleaners. They had, small businesses cleaning gutters and cleaning windows. And it was always funny. We talked about how a gutter cleaner, his home always has the worst looking gutters.
Yeah.
And it's because you worked all day, you come home, the last thing you want to do is do more work, right? I would imagine handling all that stress on a daily basis and then coming home and trying to engage with toddlers, trying to engage maybe a spouse that's tired and wants to vent. And you wonder why, again, and I say that to say this is why we should be, I get that we're probably never going to throw a parade for paying taxes, but I'm okay with it. When I see the services that you guys give, when I see the work that you guys do, this is why we shouldn't be complaining about giving not only paying those people well that serve in those positions, but giving them the training. Like you said, we're in a different age today. It's still not amazing, I don't think, but it's much better than it was when it comes to mental health, when it comes to taking these things seriously, when it comes to scheduling, right, and making sure. And I just want to encourage both the residents who might be listening, but also other local government leaders. There is no such thing as work-life balance. I say it's BS. There's just intentionality. You've got to be intentional about you as a person. Because like you just said, it doesn't matter what you do. You're not superhuman. You are human and you have capacity and you have the reality. You're not created to bear everyone's weight. And so I just appreciate you taking the time to give us a picture of what, again, the work that those people show up and they're excited about serving in that way, but it still carries a weight. And so how do we serve them? How do we be thankful for them, I think, but also how do we make sure that we are giving them the tools they need to not only do their job, but to stay healthy as humans?
Yeah, and it takes all kinds to do it. I mean, it takes a special person to do that. I mean, and they don't do it for the recognition, and that's evident, especially with those behind the console and behind the radio working at a 911 center, because they never get seen. I mean, and we'll get to some of it later in the podcast as far as you're talking about with taxes and service delivery expectation and taking care of our staff and understanding, because I've got a little neat story on my first budget that I did as a town manager, recommended to council, that kind of ties into that service delivery and paying taxes. But I mean, it's, that's the thing that we go through with it. As you talk about with the work-life balance, is it a real thing or you still have to prioritize yourself? And so understanding and setting those, what I refer to as boundaries versus a work-life balance in that, and knowing what those boundaries are. And that's, and finding those coping mechanisms to be able to deal with that, especially in the stressful environments of that rapid heart rate and then decreasing heart rate and dealing with that emergency out there. I mean, and, so, I mean, that's kind of the challenges that we face as you move up in rank and stay in this career field, that you're always going to, yes, the adrenaline and excitement is there, but I mean, so is the true emergency. And then how do you deal with it on those tough days? And are you taking it home? And how do you cope with family and have that decompression time and space as well?
So good, so good. You serve in that role for a few years, and then you take two different positions here with the Centera Group and then Vectrus. That again, tell us about those because those are outside of municipalities, I think.
Yeah, I mean the Centera one was when they first reached out to me about it, they were having some challenges with a contract there with from the government side, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do it, and then they reached out again. It's like, look, your name has come back to the top again, and told us that with some of the challenges we've got out there that we really need to bring you on board. And I looked at it again and where it was located at, and so let me get this straight. You're going to pay me to go to a military installation that is basically out in the middle of paradise because it sits in the middle of the Indian Ocean, just south of the Maldives. And so as I looked at what was out there and then got to understanding the key vital role of Diego Garcia and what it played at the time. And it's become a lot more known or prevalent now with our strategic location that it provides for some operations going on around the world now, and the aircraft that come in and out of there with its with that location. But it was basically it was a beautiful little island, and I was fortunate enough to be able to go spend about 2.5 years on and help them. They had an established fire department there, but they needed some help for training some of the staff, getting staff in better compliance with government regulations and government sides of the contract, and some equipment up to date, and putting some more leadership in place. And that's kind of what we were able to go out there and to do. And it was like working on a military base here stateside, because we did have a lot of the amenities there that we didn't have in Iraq and Afghanistan, with it being an established location with fire trucks and hard structures and dining facilities and everything else. But so we were able to do that and change the culture there with leadership and get the contract heading in the right direction and get strong support from the military there, and had it sustained that operation from a fire crash rescue standpoint with it ramping up and keeping aircraft and moving out there. We also work with the British there, because part of they had a contingency there, because it's actually located on some of the British soil of British territory. So working with that counterpart as well, so that we had Navy, Air Force from the U.S., and then we had some British content there, to be able to build that camaraderie and teamwork and show again how multidiscipline and multi-agencies come together to foster that culture and help grow and develop.
That's so cool. What a cool opportunity. And then you do that for a couple of years. You're at Vectrus. Where was Vectrus at? Was that stateside or was that?
Vectrus was in Kuwait. Went there to assist them with some stuff. We got the things stabilized there, and Diego Garcia had an opportunity to go to Vectrus, which was doing a contract in Kuwait. Still, they had kind of same thing. We had a base in the south and a base in the north. So working through that, we had 8 fire stations between the two different locations there. So went out there, and that was kind of the same thing that we had with stateside, other than on that and Diego Garcia lived out on the island itself. Iraq and Afghanistan, I was mostly living on the base. In Kuwait, I was living out in town in a condo there in town. But but Kuwait was very Americanized for what I was used to being deployed overseas. I had Starbucks, a cheesecake factory, Texas Roadhouse, things like that. My condo was out on the water, so I would drive back and forth between the bases on the north side and south side, and an assistant chief of operations in that aspect of helping, still doing fire departments and working with our locals there, and working with the military on those installations. And and now it's become and we never know what we're going to encounter. Even though you had those luxuries there, as you can see from recent news reports with the conflicts going on, how those areas in the UAE and Kuwait and that part of the region has now become targets. Even though you may have the mindset that, yes, this is luxury and paradise and very Americanized, and I've got all these amenities around me, everything can change in an instant. And that's part of the military, and part of going through those service locations of basically being in harm's way and not knowing what that outcome is going to do. And a lot of it was based off the the political climate, facing the world and the decisions that somebody above you makes. And like I said, and even when I was in the military, it's, you're signing a contract and taking an oath, and, and your freedom is you're protecting others. And so you follow that chain of command and follow that order.
After more than 325 episodes with local government leaders and thousands of conversations on stages and workshops across North America, there is one pattern I keep seeing regardless of the size, the structure, or even the budget of the organization. The people who are the most technically skilled are often the ones we are promoting into leadership. But then we expect those technical skills to translate. But let's be honest, leading people is a completely different job, a completely different reality. It's like learning a foreign language. When that gap isn't addressed, it shows up everywhere. In communication and accountability, in the very cultures we are trying to create, build, and sustain. And it shows up in the weight those new leaders now have to carry every day. That's exactly why I created the Municipal Leadership Development Circle, or for short, what we call the MLDC. It was built specifically for local government leaders who were promoted for their skills, but never fully prepared to lead people. If you are feeling that gap, or if you're seeing it on your team, in a department, now is the time to address it. Learn more and schedule a conversation at HaltingWinter.com/MLDC. That's HaltingWinter.com/MLDC, or simply use the link in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. So you, again, all over the Iraq, Afghanistan, Diego Garcia, Kuwait, you just seen it all. And you've been in tents to condo living. Just what a wild experience. Then all of a sudden the story shifts and you're going to become a fire chief in 3 places: the town of Black Mountain for Northern Wake Fire Department outside of in Raleigh, I think, North Carolina, and then the town of Weaverville. Tell us about going to Black Mountain and becoming a fire chief in a town. I think this is going to be the first time you're a fire chief in a specific municipality. Tell us about that experience, and what was it like to be, is fire, I would imagine sometimes fire can just kind of like the departments, they can just be over kind of doing their siloed thing, or was it really a collaborative experience with the town manager, with that? What did that look like?
Yeah, the fire department, like I said, my parents were in aging health then, so I was kind of looking a way to come back stateside, and I had never even been to Black Mountain, which is in western North Carolina, Buncombe County there near Asheville. And so when I flew in for the interview, that was my first time going to that town. Met with the interview team, which consisted of the city manager and some department heads there with the police chief and public works director. It felt like the interview went well. Packed up and went back to Kuwait and waited for that phone call. And, they called and offered me the position, and we talked about a start date. And so, then I transitioned back to stateside, flew back in to take that assignment. And that was looking at, and I think it all come full circle from everything I had done previously, leading up to that aspect. And I think that's what attracted them. They had some leadership challenges there, and wanted somebody to be able to build some camaraderie, work with other departments and make a strong fostered teamwork culture there. And that's kind of what we did through that. And then, Black Mountain's a beautiful little town. And so we were able to come in and create a culture where people wanted to be in the fire department, and build it from there, and working with our management and leadership. And that's kind of, how I got there, in the Black Mountain aspect. And then that was the municipal fire chief role, back stateside that I was needing at the time.
I think you might set the record for longest air travel for an interview inside municipalities. I think it may. I don't know if I had John Morrow on. He's the city manager in Port Townsend, Washington. I know he was in New Zealand before he took the town manager position. So if he interviewed while I was in New Zealand, that might beat you. But still, that is quite the trek. Kuwait to town of Black Mountain. Then tell us about the Northern Wake Fire Department. Is that what does that serve, and what did that look like?
Yeah, when I was in Black Mountain, I would have never left. My dad, I was talking about coming back stateside was because my aging parents. My dad had recently been diagnosed with cancer and was rapidly declining. So I had an opportunity to take a fire chief position at Northern Wake, which is kind of like what we talked about earlier with the private corporations, 501c3s, incorporated board departments. They're not part of municipality. They have volunteers there. They have paid staff. So they were, on the northern side of Wake County, border up to Raleigh and run calls with Raleigh. So, good size department, just doesn't have municipal ties with it. So again, we had, 5 stations there. So, about a staff between our paid staff and volunteers of about 160 employees. So when Dad got cancer, unfortunately, I left Black Mountain, went back to Northern Wake, took that position and took care of Dad. And that was about April of 22 timeframe. And then had an opportunity once he passed away in July. And then in October, ended up coming back to Western North Carolina as Weaverville is their fire chief here. Again, it's in Buncombe County on the north side of Asheville. So where Black Mountain's on the east side of Asheville in Buncombe County, Weaverville's on the north side. So still in that same county. So with an opportunity to come back here and like something, just enjoying the mountain areas here. I enjoy the Triangle and the Raleigh area. But I always tell people that family's got to come first. And so that was one of the reasons for giving up that opportunity to go back. And I'm fortunate I got to spend, that time with my family and my dad and be there while he was facing those challenges. And, again, it goes back to that leadership aspect and understanding and knowing that balance.
Yeah. You become the fire chief in the town of Weaverville in 2022. You become the town manager in 2025 of March. Tell us about when you became, when was it like town manager become on your radar? Was it simply, did you ever think about that in any of the other places you served? Or was it just an opportunity that they needed someone in the seat? Tell us the story. What happened?
It's a little of both. While I was at Black Mountain, I was, and my philosophy on leadership has always been, to understand the next role, the one above you. To try to pick up what books they're reading, pick up what magazines, conferences, things like that, so that you can understand what they're thinking and the bigger picture. Just as I talked about early on in my career, with the captain, and we talked about that safety issue, then, he's going to see the bigger picture. So I need to understand, from a leadership management perspective, what that next level is thinking, for kind of a right seat, left seat mentality of what it looks like in their seat. Their answer back to me on something may be no. But if I understand the logic behind that no, and getting to know them on that level and what that job entails, then it makes that no a lot easier to accept because you can see that bigger picture. So when I was in Black Mountain, I talked with the town manager there, and we worked on some things about what next level leadership would look like. I was able to attend the UNC School of Government in Chapel Hill for a city county administrator course, which is about a 11-month course to be able to do that. We do 1 week a month at different topics ranging from planning and zoning to public works to law enforcement, emergency management. So you do a wide gamut of essential municipal functions in that school. And so I had already had some of that training, knowing that was the path I wanted to go. So then come to Weaverville as the fire chief, and it's a little more tricky than the March of 25 time frame of that's when I transitioned to the manager role full time. October 22, I started as their fire chief. In June of 24, our current town manager decided she was leaving and had resigned from her position. Council had appointed me as the interim manager, and then this was June of 24. I was still doing the fire chief role. And then September 27th of 2024, we had a little rainstorm come through that ended up being named Tropical Storm Helene and Hurricane Helene, which devastated Western North Carolina. And so I had that dual role responsibility of now running the entire town as well as still coordinating fire efforts and search and rescue mission efforts from that aspect. So, it was a very challenging time in that, which again led to my background in fire and emergency management to be at the helm of that, which we were blessed, I think, as a municipality to be able to have that leadership in place. And it came and show, strides through that, and recovery efforts, with that leadership background of knowing how to handle and manage those disasters, not only, from a, response standpoint, but what it would look like from a recovery for the town standpoint as well.
This is one of those things, again, it's part of the issue of having a media that's always on to the next story. I mean, if we think about it, when Hurricane Helene happened, and we saw just week after week devastating pictures of North Carolina and that area, and now, it's, when did that happen? It's kind of like, if you don't live there, it's just like, it's kind of like Hurricane Katrina decades ago. It's like that. I think I know that name, but and I still know there are still things going on in Louisiana to try to recover from that all this time later. So I'm still sure that there's still all kinds of work to be done that you guys are doing. And like you say, what a unique opportunity to serve in a role at such a time as that, even though no one would necessarily want, no one wants, those moments, but that's what it takes. People just don't realize that these positions of leadership, specifically in municipalities, that work often goes unnoticed and unrecognized, but man, oh man, when the storm hits, and that's kind of the reality of this podcast. We've had Brent Bierk on, Perryville, Missouri, all the ones in Kentucky that talked about the tornadoes that have come through. I mean, Jennifer Poirier down in Florida and the hurricanes down there. It's just, these are the stories where you guys, do the work to give us our present day realities and all these services that we take for granted. And yet when the storm comes, talk about and maybe talk about that for a moment, the emergency response of the moment of chaos, but then also all the work that has to be done after. What does that look like? What is leading through? What are some of those challenges?
Yeah, and having deployed for hurricane responses previously down east, and there was a big difference in going down to eastern North Carolina for hurricanes with the flatlands there versus the terrain we have in the North Carolina mountains. But on that Monday, we started getting reports and meeting with our National Weather Service staff, and as they laid out the framework of what this storm's potential looked like. So I sent out an email to our department heads with forms attached to it, which was FEMA ICS forms, Incident Command Structure forms, 204s and 214s. And I'm also an instructor for FEMA, where I teach Incident Command, and I taught that when I was overseas for the military, teaching that side of it. So I told our department heads, go ahead and start tracking your personnel hours, equipment hours, and everything on this. I said, because if this storm gets a federal declaration, then we're ahead of the game on getting reimbursements. To where a lot of people, that's, they get so deep into the incident, and then they're trying to go back. Well, okay, how long did we use this backhoe? What equipment did we use? Things like that. And so then you're trying to put all that together while you're still in the middle of the operation, and you're behind on that paperwork. And as we know, anytime you're dealing with government, paperwork is king. Also, the red tape is king. So our department head started filling that out on Monday. The storm, actually on that Wednesday of the storm, before the storm ever got here, we started performing water rescues from floods that Wednesday night and doing evacuations. That Friday, the storm hits. We have water line washout because we're standing at the fire station that night for our evening briefing. We start losing water pressure at the fire station. That's when we realized that somewhere we've got because we topped off our water tanks in town with a little over 3 million gallons to have excess water to be able to maintain, and trying to doing some pre-planning in that aspect. And so once we started losing water pressure, knowing that we had a water leak somewhere, we had some water lines that run under our Rims Creek area that washed away during the storm. So that's what created that aspect. So looking at that and leading up to that and managing that incident and leading and bringing our teams together with our department heads doing that paperwork and having regular briefings and during then we lost all of our communications. We had no landline phones, no internet, no satellite phones at the time till we could bring Starlinks in. So our traditional means of communications of notifying the public. You had people out there with handheld battery operated radios to try to get weather information out to them. And then we would have leadership team meetings to be able to make our plan of the day, as we got into, the sustained operations. I mean, I had staff members at the fire department and public works, for one, because they couldn't get home to check on their families, but they were there, probably 14 days straight without going home to check on their families or their own property. Because as we talked about, early on, it was about service delivery to our citizens, and being able to provide that service. I mean, we brought outside fire department personnel in, outside law enforcement personnel in to help give our staff a break, and public works, putting people in there. But as we met every day, again, with no means of communications, we started making handwritten notes. We would go out in the communities to our homeowner association, pick somebody there in the neighborhood saying, here's what we've got planned for today. Here's where meals are being served. Here's where you can go to get hot showers. And then they would take in and dispersing out those handwritten notes. We would post them at community centers, at town hall, and then go out to our subdivisions and hand out. So you had to revert back to a non-typical means of communications, of town hall style meetings and meeting, with the citizens where they were, to be able to get that information out. Because if you don't get information out, you got misinformation out there. So we wanted to make sure we were doing our due diligence of trying to communicate with them. Once FEMA rolled in, and there's still a lot of recovery going on around us, but people talk about the delay in FEMA and getting funding. We were very fortunate that we had that documentation provided, because the FEMA rep walked in probably about 2 weeks after the storm. I was able to give our representative a folder, and within 3 weeks of that, we had $1.8 million of expedited funding from FEMA, to help with our debris cleanup, help offset our staffing and things of that nature. So again, it goes back to that leadership perspective of being prepared and knowing what to do in that aspect. And I think a lot of that, stem from, city management and different things. Is, a lot of people come from a planning background, or, and know and understand zoning. But in this case, I mean, my experience from an emergency management fire service perspective of responding to disasters, you help prepare me for that disaster and lead us into the recovery, and understand that, and treat it just like any other disaster. We've got to, be looking at plan A and B, but we also got to be thinking, what does plan D, E, and F look like down the road? I mean, that was the way we kind of managed that incident. And, we're very fortunate not to have the damage that a lot of, people surrounding us had, but we still had some significant damage, and we were without water for about 2 weeks and didn't have communications to be able to, to contact, our typical vendors. If you need a generator, typically you pick up the phone and call somebody and they deliver one. Well, we didn't have that means. We sent people on road mileage to Charlotte to meet with some of our vendors down there and bring a generator back to get our water treatment plant up and running. So looking at that aspect and trying to figure that out. And, like I say, that storm hit that Friday. Well, Monday was payroll day. So we had no internet, no comms. And so how are you getting your people paid? Because they still got bills. And I learned a long time ago, you don't mess with somebody's paycheck.
Yes.
So we were able to get some Starlink set up and get tied into the system to be able to at least process payroll for everybody that day. And so, I mean, that was our first step of, making sure our employees knew that they were going to be taken care of. Like I said, I mean, they spent, 14 days here in town and going through that without being able to communicate with their families. And so I wanted to ensure our employees that we were going to do our due diligence to make sure that they were taken care of. They had a place to get a meal, get a shower, and and the money was still going to hit their bank account. There would be, no loss from that aspect of, with what they were going to be facing once they did make it home and able to check on their family and their property.
That's what's so wild, man. You bring up so many things I want to chat about, but I want to be mindful of your time. The reality of municipal work, it's so mission focused, right? To deliver the services, to care about the place where you live. That's the, when you're working for Amazon and, sure, books are going, you're sending things across, whatever. You're not really connected to, I'm sending my books to, my neighbor or someone that lives in my area. Like when you're doing the work of municipal work, you are seeing the work that you're doing and interacting with these people who live around you in times of crisis. These are the people serving you are the same people that have the same drama and effective realities at their own homes. And like you say, just a unique work and unique environment to be in. One of the things, hey, here's my question for you, because you you have gone back to school a variety of times for certificates and fire rescue management, community preparedness, this thing at Chapel Hill. You have a MA in organizational leadership from Waldorf. So you obviously desire to have the insights. You desire to have the learned awareness to be able to allow then you to function in situations. You just said Weaverville has benefited from your, like when it comes to FEMA, knowing we got to be on the ball on this administrative side of forms so we can get the funding. Now as the town manager over all these different departments, you got economic development and parks and rec and all kinds of things. How has that made you dive into the weeds of other areas that make a city flourish? And where can you maybe spend? Is there a temptation to spend too much time trying to learn about all these areas instead of just leading and hiring the best people who can fill those director positions? What's the tension as a town manager of trying to learn and trying to also lead?
And that's the biggest thing. And as we talked about early on in my career, to where I decided English 101 wasn't for me, and I knew what I wanted to do. And later on, as I started going through my career, I realized how important that higher education piece was. To be able to attain my bachelor's in fire administration and my master's in organizational leadership with a concentration in public administration. And then UNC Chapel Hill, I did a graduate program for community preparedness, disaster management. So all that kind of led up to that. But when you look at the department that you manage or run, you got to build that team around you. And from a leadership perspective, I don't care what initials somebody's got behind their name or what plaques they can hang on the wall. What I look for when I'm hiring somebody now, are they the right fit? And are they going to bring, what kind of culture are they bringing? Because that's what makes our team stronger. So as they go out there, and then allow them to do their job. Don't go out there and micromanage them, because as a manager, I can't know it all, and I shouldn't be expected to know it all. But I should be able to know where to find the answers, and be able to trust but verify that our department heads and our senior leadership staff are doing their job and keeping me informed. So getting out and working with them. I've gone out and rode with sanitation on a sanitation route. One, because when a citizen called in and they happened to call one day after I had run the route and said we didn't pick up their sanitation, and I said, okay, well, what is your address? And they give me the address. I said, well, ma'am, unfortunately, we did go by to pick up your sanitation that day. I said, but you had and in this country, there's a bear problem. So, so some of the cans still have straps on so the bears can't access it. Well, that resident had their bear straps in, and our garbage trucks is run by one person with the sidearm loader to be able to dump the can. We don't run 3 people on them like they did in the older days. And so it would pick up the can and dump it. Well, we couldn't pick up that can and dump it because it had the straps on it. So I was able to explain to that citizen that, I was actually on the route that day, and here's the reason it didn't get picked up. And so then they realized that why it didn't get picked up. So doing that, so again, it goes back to that leadership by managing, walking around, being involved, getting out with your troops and doing that. Had I not been out there that day, my first reaction probably would have been, is the citizens right? And then I would have had to track down our public works director and had them backtrack and say, find out if this got picked up or if we skipped part of the route today. But again, it goes back to building that trust with your staff, everything from the boots on the ground to the department head level, and working with them. And I think that's what a lot of it comes back to, is that you're not going to know it all, but you work with them together for them to educate you on the pieces that you do need to know, and the key things, and being able to head off some of those things. And one of the things I've done, since taking over the manager role, is I've created, kind of like what a lot of people refer to as coffee with a cop. I've created the conversations with the manager. Every quarter I have sat down town hall meetings, to where the community can come in and ask the hard questions. Sometimes you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because they deserve an answer. They might not like the answer, but they at least deserve an answer. And so every quarter now we'll have those conversations with our community where they get to come in and ask any question they want to, if they haven't reached out during the meantime to email or anything like that. But it gives me that face-to-face time, not only with our staff, but it gives me face-to-face time with the community to be able to engage them as well. And that's gone a long ways with building that trust. And, as you talked about earlier with that tax rate in there, is that, when the first budget I submitted as the manager full time, and, I was asking for a tax increase, and I had asked for 2 cents. And I think this is rarely and unheard of, but the community come and said that, we appreciate living in Weaverville. We're offered quality service of life, and we want to pay more in taxes if it'll mean that we get better services and continue the service that we have, because otherwise the town's not going to be able to fund it. So my 2 cent request there was a discussion about 3 cent and 4 cent with council, and they landed on 3 cents. So again, as you talked about earlier with the tax rate being able to fund those services provided from a municipality, that was an example, and to me, an unheard of thing, where you've got the community coming in and saying that, hey, we like the services that get delivered here. We feel special being in this town, and we want to be able to contribute more, and think we should contribute more to keep those services coming like that. And so that was a unique opportunity to be able to get our tax rate increase, and to still be able to provide that quality level service. But I think it goes back to that citizen and community engagement, to be able to sit down with your community, get that buy-in and trust, and know that if you are asking for that tax increase, then they know you're still being as frugal as you can with those tax dollars, because they see the end results, and that's built over that communication and transparency and trust. And had we not been able to sit down and have some of those conversations, and that would have been the first time they were hearing about a possible tax rate increase, then I'm sure the outcome would have been a lot different.
Yeah. Well, you just said something there. Being comfortable with uncomfortability is such a great statement in so many ways. And I'm sure it wasn't comfortable to be living in a tent in the sand while trying to build, fire stations. And it's not comfortable being in a room with people grilling you and asking questions that can make in a way that can kind of feel disrespectful or not, but at the end of the day, I always say this: it's the curse of knowledge, right? You now, as the town manager in Weaverville, have, and with all of your experience throughout life in leadership, have an awareness that you will never be on your lowest day, on your most uncaffeinated, groggy, unslept mind. You will never be below an 8 in all that you know in the things, right, of your area of scope of leadership. That resident, on their best day, they'll never be above a 3 in what they know, because it's not their world. They're not, right, a professional. They're not trained in it. They have no experience in the real day-to-day things. They can assume, they can make educated guesses, but again, that will never be above a 3. The gap between a 3 and an 8 is huge. And that's what we have to remember. I think if you're listening today and you're like, gosh, I'm having a hard time being comfortable with uncomfortability, because I feel like I'm never comfortable. I'm just always getting grilled and always on the hot seat. And I would just encourage you to remember, you're at an 8, and that doesn't put you, I don't say that to be in superiority. I mean it to say that uncomfortability is not because that person at that 3 is right. It's because they don't know. And we have to do a better job of articulating in ways that get rid of the bureaucracy, get rid of you've been in the military, right? All the abbreviations, all the acronyms, they can overwhelm someone who's just trying to know, like, what does this mean for me? Right. And it seems like you guys, if they came and said, we don't want to pay the increase of 2 cents, we want to bump it to 3, you've got to be doing something there to communicate, to engage people in ways that they understand and they felt heard and respected. That is amazing in municipality work. So I just want to say thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the biggest thing. And when I looked and took on this role, I mean, and that was what I kind of evaluated, and always coming from a risk management background is what is our risk? What can we do to improve that risk, or what can we do to minimize it? And I looked at and we always talk about communication and transparency, and people throw buzzwords around all the time, but what are you truly doing about it? And to me, I felt that's where I could make a difference and change perception, because perception is reality to a lot of people. So if I was offering them the opportunity to have those conversations, and we, the first few, I mean, wasn't a lot of people showing up for it, but at least they were getting the opportunity to ask questions. And then as the word got out that the manager is willing to sit down and have that uncomfortable conversation, then more and more people started showing up, and we got that buy-in and that trust out of it. And I mean, that's what made us take off and build off of that. And I go out and meet with with the HOAs, the homeowner associations. I meet with our Weaverville Business Association, the downtown district. I attend their meetings and offer that same communications opportunity. And to me, that's where it's at. I mean, the rubber meets the road with our citizens by being able to communicate with them and us continuing to provide that same level of service. I mean, there's been things posted on Facebook and then I've had citizens step on there and defend it because they know that, somebody's looking to stir the pot or saying that's not the interaction I've had or whatever. And so it comes with that because, obviously, I mean, if you're following social media every day from a town manager perspective, I mean, it can be demoralizing and defeating, and looking at that of some of the comments that get posted out there. And again, it's because people don't have all the information, and then somebody will post something and then somebody will build off what little knowledge or insight they have. So again, I mean, having people out there that, as we said in the military, always somebody's got your six and got your back, is that you taking that time to communicate with those people in our community and knowing that that education is key as far as the communication and transparency piece, and they've seen that service delivery firsthand, and then knowing the job that our employees do out there. And just like we talked about, they were here for 14 days straight. I mean, our community knows the dedication that our employees have to this town. And after Hurricane Helene, I mean, it was neighbor helping neighbor in the community coming together. I mean, that's one of the things that we've strived to get back to, is that, just like 9/11, I mean, people come together after a disaster and in a crisis, and you see everybody set their differences aside and work together. I mean, that's the environment and culture that we've tried to create in town, is for that camaraderie and offering our citizens that service delivery.
So good. So good. I want to close with this because, and thank you for giving us so much of your time and your insights today. I've had a lot of friends who've been firefighters. And one of the things I think from the outside world of people that don't know firefighters, they know the schedule. They go, oh, these guys have the best schedule ever. They work 3 times a month and they have all this free time. And I want to ask, because I think that's from people who don't, the toll it takes to be an emergency response, physical, emotional, to think that you're on 24/7, to be on in high intense, just those kind of situations. And then to also see things. I mean, my dad, again, I mentioned, was a volunteer firefighter. We had a plane crash, skydivers. I can't remember, 16 people on it, plane crash, and everyone was deceased. I mean, here's these volunteer firefighters, farmers out picking up, the remains of people out of a plane crash. I mean, it was horrible. My father would never, he wouldn't talk about it, but I know from my mom, he'd never forget that. It was life-changing, right? To see the things that you guys have to see and go through. It's a weight. Now you're in a city management position, and you don't get the city management role isn't 9 to 5. You've got evening meetings, you've got evening events, you got weekend events, community things. You got storms that come in, and they don't call and say, hey, we're going to try. When would it be best to schedule our hurricane? They come, and and it's not like you're not busy. You're just waiting around for something to happen. You got full schedules, full lives. Then you're dealing with all these kind of things. And it's not just the storms. You've got federal government things that impact local gov. You've got state things. I mean, you got all kinds of things on your plate. How do you, I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe that you just have to be intentional to care for your profession in a way that also, like you said earlier, in fact, you said boundaries. And I think that's a beautiful way to go. You just got to know, you only have so much in your tank, and you've got to set a boundary to take care of yourself so that you can be your best at work. What does that look like for you, Scottie? How do you recharge? How do you reset? How do you make sure that you have enough in the tank to operate the way you want to lead well?
And I tell people a lot, I mean, that I put out more fires as a city manager, town manager, than I ever did as a fire chief, because there's always a fire going on somewhere that somebody's expecting you to respond to. But as far as the boundaries and dealing with it, I mean, that was a conversation I had with council. I went through the process, and they hired an outside consultant when they were doing the interviews. And I applied, interviewed with everyone. And, the last round of interviews was with the council. And then I told them when they offered me the job, is that I'm willing to move forward if you're willing to set boundaries, and we need to understand what those boundaries are. I said, I can go back to being the fire chief here, and you can hire you another town manager. I said, because I know what my day looks like as a fire chief. I've done that for a number of years. I said, and going into the city manager role is going to be a little different. We need to know, what my expectation is of you as council. Council, you need to know what my expectation is from that aspect. I said, and so, I've, through the hurricane and trying to do both jobs as a fire chief and town manager, I killed myself physically and mentally. So it was a very challenging and taxing role on that aspect and wanting to provide that level of service and not recognizing my own physical and mental health needs going through that. And I sit on the peer support team for the state of North Carolina. So I've been through some of those challenges where somebody on the other end was having that mental health crisis and reached out to me. And so, but I wasn't recognizing it in myself. And I finally got to the point where, when council offered me the job, I said, here's how it's going to look moving forward. And I was comfortable with that, because I knew I had a good job as a fire chief. Yes, I wanted to move up in the ranks as a city manager and felt like I was competent and capable of it. But without boundaries, then I wasn't going to be able to be successful. So what I told council is that if I can't take care of myself, I can't take care of the town. And I know you're expecting me to be able to take care of the town and take care of the employees. We showed that we could do it during a hurricane, but here's where the boundaries are going to be set. We talked about some of that, in there. Typically now I go to the gym about 4:30 every morning. I get to my office about 6:30, so that I've got some quiet time in there before other staff get into the office, and I get a lot more work done that first couple hours of the morning in the office than I do most of the day before other people get in and stop tapping on the door and say, hey, if you got a minute for a conversation, it turns into an hour conversation. But that aspect, and I know people say, well, how do you have those boundaries if you're getting up so early? Because to me, it was about recognizing where I was failing myself at, taking care of myself physically and mentally to be in better shape to lead and manage our staff, and also set an example and let, because if I want to talk about, as we say, work-life balance, but I don't show that, then the employees aren't going to buy into it either. If I'm asking them every time they turn around and put in for a vacation day, why are you needing a day off? I need you to go do this. But if they see me leading from the front and see me set that example, and that came from having an upfront, hard conversation with council to know if I wanted to move forward, because as I talked about earlier, it's got to be a good fit for both parties. And so determining if my requirements were going to be a good fit for them, and it turned out it was, and it helped me focus on that physical and mental health aspect that's going to allow me to prolong life and being able to provide a service from the manager's seat that I wouldn't have been able to provide, and that I was struggling to provide during the storm, being overwhelmed and not a clear picture and vision and walking around in a fog all the time. So now this allows me to be able to do that. And I set my schedule that way, and it's become a routine. I don't even set an alarm clock to get up in the morning, and I'm still up 3:30, 4 o'clock and in the gym by 4:30. And that's just, discipline and has become a habit. And that's what's, allowed me to function in this aspect. And that's what I would encourage any city manager, town manager out there to do, to find your balance, understand your boundaries, and know that you've got to take care of yourself in order to take care of everything else that's asked of you. And so that's what I've found going through this aspect, is that boundaries were a priority, but you've got to make yourself a priority as well.
Yeah. You said something really insightful there. You said a lot of stuff, but the one thing I think that will land, I hope, with some leaders that are listening, is you recognized that if you didn't have boundaries, you would not be able to lead. You wouldn't be able to have success. And I think that's the temptation, especially for young leaders. Maybe you're getting this is your first city management position, whatever it is, maybe your first department head position. You kind of will say, well, maybe it doesn't look healthy, but I'll be fine. I'll make such a difference that I said that when I was young. I'm going to lead in such a way that they'll respect me, and then they'll change, and then they'll make it healthier. That never happens. And so I just you got to go in and go, because like you said, if you don't have a healthy boundary, if you don't have a healthy rhythm, schedule, etc., you will not do the job well. And then you will become bitter at the people that it's not necessarily their fault. It's your responsibility to say, hey, if you want me at high performance, this is what I need to do that. Right. And so I think, some wisdom there to make sure that you are having a healthy conversation with counsel, with whoever it is that can have sway over your rhythms and your schedule. And like you say, you don't want to be especially a town manager that says, I know a lot of city managers who say, I want you to all be healthy. They tell their teams they want to be healthy, and yet they email them all hours of the day. And it's like, well, you're telling them to be on all the time. You're going against what you say. Your actions aren't in line with what you say. And I go, I know you don't mean that, but that's what happens. And so how do we set the standard by action, not just words? No, great insights.
Yeah. And then if you're creating a culture to where, department heads, they think they, look better or shine because they're staying in the office to 6 or 7 o'clock at night and then producing that work or whatever. But, it's because they feel like that's what's expected of them. And you haven't had that conversation saying, hey, is it a boundary work-life issue, whatever? Why are you working till 7? I understand some projects may take that much time, but do we have our tasks divvied up the right way? And are you delegating those tasks? Or are you training and growing and developing somebody under you that you don't have to stay in the office that late, that you can assign that task? And so when we have those conversations and department heads realize that it's okay to leave at 5 o'clock and the work's going to be there tomorrow, or how are we prioritizing this task, and knowing that my expectation is that we'll have professional development. Our department heads are expecting to grow and develop with succession planning and develop people under them and assign those tasks so that they aren't having to stay there to 7, 8 o'clock at night because, was that a time management issue that you were there that late, or we actually got too much work and we're not divvying it up the right way? I mean, so as we went through those processes, the department heads started understanding that it was serious, and I wanted them to be able to find that boundary for them to be able to be more productive, because if you can find it, you'll find that you're a lot more productive during that day versus you're creating burnout for yourself by staying and putting in those longer hours.
No, it's so good. Such a great truth. Oh man, there's so many. We could talk forever, Scottie. We take a 2-hour episode, but I want to be mindful of your time. And man, anything else you'd leave us before we sign off?
No, I mean, the biggest thing is just one, making sure you're taking care of yourself physically and mentally. This job is very demanding and can be overwhelming. But also as you grow up through leadership, don't forget where you came from and look after your employees that are looking up to you for that example. And be that example to them. I mean, and instill that leadership in others and help them grow. I mean, to me, that's what it's about. I mean, we talk about generational differences or culture differences in the fire service, and I hear people say all the time, well, this generation doesn't even know how to cut grass or run the weed eater. I was like, so my question back to them was, okay, have you taken the time to show them? Did they have to show you how to do updates on your phone now? So put yourself in that perspective, and instead of just complaining about a generational gap difference, understand how we help each other, and it'll be more productive around that kitchen table. And that's where we solve a lot of the world's problems, around that kitchen table with just a simple conversation. And that's what I would encourage all leaders out there to do, is that help grow and develop the next generation of future leaders out there.
I love it. I love the two things I'm taking away is, just communication. You're having conversations at the table. I love that. And you're being okay, being comfortable with uncomfortability. Two incredible takeaways and so many more. What a story. What a journey in life you've had, Scottie. And thank you for taking time today to share on the HaltingWinter Podcast your insights and most importantly, just your life and your journey. What an incredible story.
Thank you, Seth. I appreciate the opportunity and the time.
The stories we share here on the HaltingWinter Podcast remind us where government really lives, locally, right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at HaltingWinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.